Today we're going to be taking a look at the recently arrived Glory and Empire, First Victories, Wellington versus Napoleon from Lock and Load. This is their new tactical Napoleonics system by designer Terry Doherty, and I'm very excited to play this for a number of reasons, and I thought that I would present to you a playthrough of one of the smaller scenarios from the game. The game covers the Peninsular War between the British and the French. You will have Wellington, and you will have Marshal Junot in this box, even though Napoleon's name's on the cover. But as we know, you probably can't sell a game about the Napoleonic period without putting Napoleon's name on the cover. I have set up here the opening scenario from the Battle of Roliça, or Roliça. Someone tell me how to pronounce that, from August 1808. And this scenario is going to be a sort of tactical withdrawal by the French here under brigade commander, or is he a divisional commander here, Delaborde, who is right here, and here you can see his photo. The basic tactics for the French here are going to be to withdraw this force down in this direction and climb this hill to take up a defensive position they had as part of their battle plan. The British and their Portuguese allies are going to be coming on turn by turn from this direction, and this direction. So we've got kind of a surrounded, outflanked position by the French, and they're going to have to pull back. Victory conditions of the scenario: if the British can cause at least one step loss to French units, they will win some level of victory. Otherwise, the French, if they can pull back without taking step losses, they will at least achieve a minor victory getting back to this hill. I want to talk a little bit about this game because I will be playing it with the solo cards that come with the game, and I think this is a very cool aspect to the design here. Clearly, a lot of work has gone into making this game soloable without having to just play both sides two-handed. The designer, Terry Doherty, I believe, at the very least, is one of the people responsible, if not the sole person responsible, for the La Bataille Regs 30 rule system that a lot of La Bataille players play. And having played this game last night with a friend doing a learning game on the Vimero map, there's a lot of DNA here with the Clash of Arms tactical games. In fact, there's a lot of DNA with Battles from the Age of Reason as well, which makes a lot of sense because that's kind of a sister series to La Bataille. But a lot of the mechanics and procedures in this game are very familiar to me, having just played a lot of Battles from the Age of Reason at the end of last year. So it was a very comfortable jumping on point for learning. I can see that it might be a little bit of a beast to try and come to grips with, just being virgin to those systems, but a lot of it makes sense, and there's a ton of material packed into this game. Here we see the scenario booklet. It is over 100 pages. It's also got the rules for the card system in here. I'll explain that in a moment. It comes with tons of player aids. Here is the battalion and brigade game sequence of play, and here's the rule book. And the rule book contains 3 separate rule sets of varying complexity. So last night we played the Soldiers game, which is the quote-unquote basic game, although it's still pretty meaty and there's still a lot there. Here you see the table of contents. We've got the Soldiers game, then we've got the Battalion game, which is what I'm going to be playing here, because after playing the Soldiers game and feeling pretty comfortable with it, I read through the brigade rules, or excuse me, the battalion rules, and there's not too much extra stuff. There are a few phases that have some extra things. There's a few mechanics that get added to the close combat procedure and artillery, but all of those things are also found very similarly in Battles from the Age of Reason, so I'm already pretty comfortable with what they add. So we're going to go right in for my second play into the battalion game rules. Battalion game signified by this red cannon here. There is a third, more complex rule set called the brigade game. And the brigade game adds a whole host of other things for unit maneuver and formations, the way that your units have to move on the map and stay kind of connected to one another. It adds a lot there, and eventually I'm going to get around to playing it, but for now, we're going to stick with the mid-level battalion game rules as we play through this scenario. Now, like I mentioned, and by the way, spiral-bound booklets, hell yes. Lock and Load went the extra distance for this. It's very nice to have spiral-bound booklets to be able to flip through and turn to pages and whatnot, and keep the footprint of the rule book to a single sheet of paper. It is really nicely laid out. There's a lot of space. It's very readable. There's a lot of repetition in the rules, so it's very referenceable. I just think overall a very well-designed rule book experience as I learned and played yesterday. Now, like I said, the game comes with cards. And we've got two kinds of cards. We've got command cards, which represent the leaders and sort of their orders and decision-making that the leaders would make for their units. And then we've got decks of action cards. And there is a set of command cards for each battle. The box contains two battles. We've got the Battle of Roliça and the Battle of Vimiro. Vimiro is actually twice as big as this map, so it's a much larger affair. But both of the games are going to take, a while to play if you're playing the full battle. So here we have the Vimiro deck, V, and here we have the Roliça deck. What's nice about this is that you can make the solo player, the card-driven solo opponent, your choice of which side in the battle. So if you're playing Vimiro, you can make the French be AI controlled, or you can make the British AI controlled. And the same is true of Roliça, and that is why we have the three French commanders here. For the Battle of Roliça, I am going to be playing the Allies, because who doesn't want to play Wellington? And we want to see if the AI can make this retreat down this road to this hilltop. Now, this scenario may not be the best for learning this game, because the French are trying to avoid combat. So it's likely there will not be very many combats. I think at most we'll probably get some skirmisher fire. And that is one element of this system that I think is quite unique and really nice, is the modeling of skirmishing in the Napoleonic era. A lot of times games kind of build that into the general combat flow. But unit skirmishers and the way that those skirmishers operated through terrain is reflected here really nicely. You can see I've got these markers on top of the units. We've got some French light infantry in a line here. I've set them up kind of along the British approaches, and I've set them into skirmish formation. There are two types of skirmish formation. All units, pretty much all units can go into skirmish formation, but there are two types. There's skirmishing en tirailleur, which is French for basically firing skirmishing. That's what your line infantry is going to be able to do. So when you see their SP value here, this guy is a 5. That superscript 2 means how many of those SPs he can sort of put forward of the battalion to engage in sort of like approach fire from the enemy and screen enemy fire from the rest of the main body of troops. So there's a marker for that. Now, I don't have any of these French line infantry in a skirmisher en tirailleur because they're trying to leave, and I don't need them to be in sort of a formation that has units sort of out front. You've also got skirmishers en débandade, which is what light infantry are going to use to kind of disperse the formation and make them sort of have all-around facing, so their zones of control are all around the unit. Again, it does some very similar things to screening enemy fire and allowing you to shoot further away. Normally, units can only engage in fire combat in adjacent hexes, but when you have skirmishers deployed, you can actually fire into 2 hexes, and actually the terrain doesn't matter either. So if there's like rough terrain or blocking terrain, your skirmishers en débandade can actually go into that terrain, and that's how you're able to fire into a second hex in front of you. It's a really nice way to model the way that Napoleonic battalion tactics took place, and it gives the game a very Napoleonic feel. It separates this game from games about battles earlier in a chronological period. So this feels, even though we're working with a very similar rule set to Battles from the Age of Reason, this feels very Napoleonic. The units have a lot more individual initiative. They don't need to be in straight lines, and the skirmishing factor here really gives you a different feel for the way combat was prosecuted by these soldiers. So in that way, I think it's actually a very nice companion piece to games about the 18th century. You could play, Battles from the Age of Reason and then come to this, and there's a lot of very similar rules, and you'd be very comfortable making the change, but you'll notice immediately that your tactics are going to have to be very different, and I think that is awesome. So anyways, we've got these skirmisher markers out here, and I'll explain that a little more as we go. Now, the downside to skirmishers en débandade, whereas skirmishers en tirailleur, which I don't have out right now, it's very easy. You just flick the marker in and out as you want. You can deploy the SPs from your battalions how you want. Skirmishers en débandade, they have to make a in-command check if they're in skirmishers en débandade. Because the unit is sort of more dispersed, even if they're in command range of their leader, who in this battle is going to be Brenier right here. He is the first brigade commander, that 1-1. All of these units here in skirmish mode are his, including this cavalry unit here. If you're in skirmishing en débandade, you must make a check to see if you are actually in command, if you were inside your leader's command range. So that may be a reason not to set these guys up this way. And in fact, knowing the reinforcement schedule, that this British column is coming in first, I actually may choose not to have these guys start in skirmish en débandade, because then I will know that they are going to be in command. And I want these guys, because they're light infantry, I want them to serve as the rear guard as I make my way down this road. So we'll leave this guy and this guy who's under the leader in skirmisher en débandade, because the British get the first initiative of the game and they're going to come this way. Let's also talk quickly about how nice the map is. We've got a very, very detailed style. It's got almost like a graphic novel style to it. The artist on this game did a fantastic job, and I apologize for not knowing the name right off the bat, but you can see this kind of like scrub brush here with the little trees and the rolling little bushes and stuff. The bridge, we've got little towns. We've got the town here of Colombera. You know, there's like little buildings and like a little church. It's just a really lushly produced package, and the color scheme is very evocative of the Iberian Peninsula. And the paper stock, though you can't tell because it's under plexi, is very, very thick. It's actually more like a card stock than it is paper stock, which is really nice, which means the map is going to hang up to a lot of repeat plays. And it also flattens pretty nicely, too, so that's pretty good. Counters are beautiful. They've got kind of that influence, maybe, I guess, visually by La Bataille, where the soldier uniforms are reflected in the color schemes, but they're big. These are 5/8 or 9/16 counters. I can't remember exactly. I think they're 9/16 counters. So they're the same size we saw in Banish All Their Fear, so it makes playing the game really nice. And the unit and the informational markers here are 1/2 inch, so they're smaller than the unit, so you're not covering up valuable information. It's quite nice to play with. The only complaint I have so far is that when you stack up multiple units with multiple informational markers, you get kind of these stacks that have like uneven balance points, so it's possible that you'll knock them over, but it's not too bad. As you can see, we have a ton of informational markers. Not all of these markers are used in every version of the rules. In the battalion game, we're going to be using most of these. There are lots of rules about so many different things, but the most common ones you're going to find are your morale statuses, which are going to be the ones with the letters on them. So you will see here, we've got disordered, we've got broken, and then on the back sides of these are shaken and routed as well. We've got the skirmish markers, so this is normal skirmishing on tirailleur, this is skirmishing on débandade, and then you've got things like square, out of command, road march, column, and so forth. So you'll see some of that stuff as we play. All of the modifiers of those statuses are actually on the counter, which is really nice. You can tell at a glance what exactly is going on. And then the other nice thing is that the game comes with some artillery fire templates to show you what the range of artillery is based on how they're firing. And the reason there are two of them is because one lines up if you're facing a vertex. This is the pattern, the cone of fire of artillery, and how they can shoot and what they can hit. And so you never have to do any sort of abstract line of sight things. You can literally just put this on top of your artillery and be like, I can shoot that. There might be line of sight blocking by terrain and units, but you can at least see with the cone of fire. The other one here is if the artillery is facing a hex side, which it's allowed to do. So you've got two different templates for two different cones of fire, and I think that is awesome. This is sort of like a really nice way to model the cone of artillery fire. Like I said, tons of player aids. The rules are really nice. Here we see the turn track. There is a random event system in this game where, based on the initiative rolls, which works very similar to Battles from the Age of Reason, you might get random events. And yeah, so that's basically what we've got here in a nutshell. Now, very quickly, I just want to talk about the cards. So we talked about the different kinds of cards, and we talked about the command cards. And what's nice is you'll make a deck of these, and when you need to make a decision about what someone's doing, you'll flip the card and be like, okay, well, now we are activating Delaboard, and then we'll flip a card from the action deck and see what is he going to do. Is he going to fire? Is he going to move? Is he going to close combat? And that's going to be dependent on what his orders that he received this turn are. And who has initiative, and kind of whether he's aggressive or not, or conservative, and what have you. So it's a really nice way to make a flowchart into a deck of cards. I think it takes a lot of inspiration from kind of what Stuka Joe I've seen do with other games that have a sequence of play cards. Very kind of similar. And so it's going to be kind of driven. Now, there's three different decks of action cards. There's the core cards that are going to be in the deck every turn. Then there's these two decks here with these symbols. If you've got a side that's in a more aggressive posture, you're going to use these cards. And if you have a side that's in a more defensive posture, you're going to use these cards. The scenarios tell you which posture the force that is playing the AI is going to be in. And so in this scenario, we have the French trying to make a retreat. They're going to be in defensive posture. So we are not going to use the aggressive posture cards. We are going to be using the core cards plus the defensive posture action cards plus the three commanders. And I will show you how this works as we play. The game uses a D100 system. So you've got two dice that you're going to D10s that you're going to roll. Anything else I need to go over? I don't think so. We'll just get into the gameplay, and I'll show you how everything works here. It should be a lot of fun. I'm going to see if I can at least catch some of the French and put the screws to them before they can retreat, and we'll see how that goes. Yeah, hope you enjoy this playthrough, and especially the playthrough using the cards, and I'll go through these as I pull them to show you how exactly it works. So first thing we do on a turn is we would roll for initiative. Now, the scenario tells us that the British have the initiative on the first turn of the scenario. But we still need to roll because we might possibly get an event. We were very close, but we didn't. So here's what was rolled. Now, on the turn track, there are modifiers to this roll based on the scenario you're playing, the commanders involved. In this scenario, both commanders add 3 to their roll, so this would have been a 9 to a 4. That would have allowed the French to win initiative, and that's where we would have consulted these cards. However, we know that the British win initiative. Neither player rolled a 0, so there is no random event for this turn of the game, and we're going to move directly from there into the who goes first. So the British, because they win initiative, get to choose who goes first for the turn. They're going to go first because they have ground that they need to cover, and they need to put the French under pressure quickly. Then we go to the command attachment phase. This is where special types of units can be assigned to various commanders. So this would be what are called assets. So if we come over here and look at the British order of battle, you can see that the British here under Bathurst have these cavalry assets and these artillery assets. These can be freely reassigned every turn to the different brigades in the battle. Now, in this particular instance, I do not believe that any of those assets are present in this scenario, and I don't think Bathurst is in this scenario either. I think the only brigades we're going to have are the 2nd Brigade, the 4th Brigade, and we are going to have Fane's 6th Brigade who are coming on this first turn. So we don't need to do any assignment of assets. The French in this scenario have no assets as well. Actually, that's not true. They have 2 assets. They have the artillery and the cavalry that is located here. So we've got this artillery unit and this cavalry unit. They're allowed to be assigned to a particular command. I think I'm going to make the artillery assigned to Thomier's 2nd Brigade here because I want it to get out of the way. Now, I guess there's a tactical consideration here. If I set it up, if I had set it up differently, I could have assigned it somewhere else or even to that thing, and it could have potentially fired and covered the retreat for the French. But I think this could be the wrong decision, but I think I just want to get out of here. And so I have the artillery limbered, and we're going to move it along this road and get it out of there. When I get to some of this elevated terrain down here, maybe I will unlimber it to cover the rest of the stragglers falling in behind, but I think to begin with, I don't think I need to. So the artillery is going to be assigned to Thomier's 2nd Brigade. The cavalry we're going to have assigned to Brenier's 1st Brigade, and the reason I'm doing that is because I want to have some sort of mobile element to this in case the British come on very quickly here. I want to be able to screen, especially as they come down this river, and the British, if I don't know what the movement's going to look like, but if the British come down this way and are kind of shadowing along this creek, I want to make sure the cavalry can screen them. So that's my assignment phase. What's it called? It's called the command attachment phase. Yeah, that's what it's called. All right, so now we have to see how many orders each side gets, and the orders are based on the die roll. Each scenario is going to have an orders chart that tells you, based on the modified roll that you made, how many orders you're going to get. So in this case, the French rolled a 9. They're going to get 1 order. And the British rolled a 4. They are going to get 0 orders. Now, that's problematic for a number of reasons. And this is where kind of the game command and control is actually modeled, because you're not... Command and control in this game is modeled by distance to your direct commander, so for units. But there's not like a chain of command like there is most of the time, at least in this game, like there is in Battles from the Age of Reason. Instead, the number of orders you receive is going to, and this is closer to La Bataille, specifically Regs 30, is going to determine what units are going to be able to attack or be in reserve. So those are the 2 orders in this game, attack and reserve. You cannot do a close combat unless you are in an attack order. You cannot, basically, and if you're in reserve order, you actually, you can't attack, but you do get to move on the opposing player's turn. So depending on which command this order goes to, all of the units under that command will either be in reserve or attack order. Now, if a command doesn't get an order, like, for example, the British are about to not have an order, they are going to not be able to attack. They're only going to be able to move. So this is where some of the command and control friction comes into play, and I think it's a really interesting and elegant system to determine where how you're going to focus your efforts on the battlefield. Additionally, if you lost the initiative, you must declare your orders first, so the opposing player can get to see what your orders are going to be before they decide whether they're going to be in reserve or attack. And that sort of control of the initiative is kind of the main way you can play this game and be good at playing the game. So I think what I'm going to do... So, what's interesting here is I think I should probably give a reserve order. And the reason I want to do that, well, let me think about it and come back. Quick interlude here just to show you how the orders phase for the French would work. So normally, you would take all of the commanders and you would put them into a deck. However, you only put in the brigade leaders if they're not in command to their division leader. And in this case... the division leader is his command range to his brigade leaders is they're in command. So the only card that goes in the deck then is the single French division leader of this scenario. Normally you would shuffle and draw, and then you would see what kind of order is going to be made. So here we are going to flip the only card in the deck, which is Delabord, and then we are going to roll a die to see. He's so this is if they win initiative, you would draw a card and see who, what they would choose. Orders initiative, you don't need to do that. Here's the order. So proximity to enemy, they are, I believe, distant because they're not even on the map yet. So on a 3 through 9, or excuse me, on a 0 through 4, we would get a reserve order. There it is. That's a 2, and he's going to get a reserve order, which thankfully matches up. He is the divisional commander. That means every subordinate leader and subordinate unit to those leaders is going to have the same order. So he's basically passing the reserve order down through the formation. That means the entire French force is going to be able to move. Next is what's called the orders initiative phase. This is where leaders that didn't get an order could roll to see if they can get an order. Now, in this case, because the divisional commander has the order, all of the leaders under his command have the order. The British and the Portuguese in this game in Roliça are not allowed to roll for initiative order. So you can see already the differences in the command structures about how the French are going to be a lot more agile, a lot more tactically responsive to changing situations, whereas the British are going to be locked into whatever their die roll is, and that can go against them quite heavily. So we've established that the British are going first on turn 1. We've assigned our orders, and now it is the British turn. First, there's a recovery segment. This is where you rally and your cavalry recover. Then you can try and resupply artillery that have used ammo. That's part of the battalion level game. We may see that, we may not. Then we go to the fire segment and the non-player artillery segment. So if there is fire combat eligible to be had by the player taking their turn, in this case the British, they would shoot. And then the non-player artillery would get a chance to fire. And in that way, this game system is a lot like Battles of the American Revolution, where artillery are firing in the defensive player's phase, but it also means that artillery gets to fire twice in a single turn, once on your turn and then once on the opponent's turn. So our artillery is going to be a very powerful tool in this game, as it should be in the Napoleonic era. Finally, we go to the movement segment, and this is where we get to move our units. So the British are going to take their move. Each unit is going to have some number of movement points based on their type of unit and whether they are in command or out of command to their leader. So I'm going to do all that now and show you where the British end up. All right, well, here we are with the British advance. This is Fane's 6th Brigade. You can see that they're all in skirmisher on debandade formation. It's because these are British light infantry. And they can actually motor pretty quick over the terrain. They're able to basically treat most terrain as one movement point. And you can force march in the battalion level rule. So I did do that. I force marched up here. That's as much as I was willing to risk. But perhaps I should have gone further. So to the top of this ridge, and what I'm trying to hopefully do is get these guys down this ridge and try to intercept the French somewhere down here where they can skirmish across this river. But I had to make a morale check for exceeding my movement allowance, and the further you move past your movement allowance, the more likely it is you will fail your morale check. So we are disordered here under these three. These two skirmishers stayed in good order, which is nice. So that is the British movement done. Fane's 6th Brigade is on the field. And now we go to the next phase of the turn, which I believe is the French reserve movement phase. All right, so we go again now to the decks for the reserve orders phase for the French. Again, like in the orders phase, we only use the cards for the commanders that have specific orders. In this case, because Delabord, the division leader, has a reserve order that goes down to his subordinates who are in command, and so we don't use these cards because they have the same order he does. So normally we would shuffle these up and then we would draw. Okay, well, we got Delabord, we knew that. Now we go to the action deck and we see what exactly they are going to do. So here is the action card. And this is where we would look. So if we had to do fire combat, which we can't here because no one's in range, we would draw a card and see who they would target. Now there's no fire combat to target, so now we go to movement, and this is the reserve movement phase. So we look at the priorities on this card for how Delabord's going to move. So movement. The first priority is launch a close combat attack, enemy close, and there's an attack order. Well, that's not true. The enemy is not close enough. Well, the enemy is in close within 8 hexes, but we don't have an attack order, so we go to the next priority. Withdraw. Heavy losses or enemy to the rear. This means that if we have lost a bunch of units or we have units sort of approaching from the rear of our formation, we would do that. which is not true. Finally, move to objective or defense position. And this is going to take priority here. If we come over and we look at the scenario, we can see at the beginning of the scenario that the French AI wants to withdraw in this direction, down this road, and go to this second position. That's sort of their defense position, essentially. So this third priority on the card, move to objective DP, is going to be what we do. So I am going to collect the French forces, and we're going to move in sort of this general direction to get back to how we win the scenario. And then obviously if we would draw another card in close combat if we have to do a target selection there. And you also draw these cards to see if a unit will take a reaction decision. So if there's like a reaction charge attempt or a reaction fire attempt, you'll just draw a card off the top of the deck and just look at this line and it will tell you whether the units do that or not. There's different tendencies on these cards based on if they're in the core deck, which this one is, or they're in the aggressive or defensive deck, which is kind of gives like a nice little difference in flavor to like what the units are going to do. But this one's going to be pretty easy. This is what I would have had the French do if I wasn't using the AI system anyways. So let's go ahead and do that. So here's the French position after their reserve movement. We've deployed skirmishers here with the French line infantry along this river line. We've moved down the French light infantry to kind of screen this northern approach. I could have put everyone into road column and just marched them really far, but I want to have some action in this scenario. It does seem like it's a little bit of a competitive scenario. Is probably not its best. It's not best showcase for that because the French are just trying to run away. But I figured I would just throw this stuff out here like this just to show you. So now that the French have done the reserve movement, the British would be able to do any close combats that they'd be eligible for. Obviously, there is none. And then we would flip over to the French side of the turn, which in this case, because the French only have one order affecting all of their troops, which is his reserve order, they actually can't do anything on their turn. They've already moved this turn. They did it during the British phase. And they have no other units that can move outside of the reserve order. So the French turn, and I should mention the Allies don't have a reserve order, so they can't move during the French turn. So in general, the turn was very quick. It was just the French moving away and the British trying to get in a position to chase them down. So the French half of the turn, nothing I don't think actually happens. There's a rally phase. I don't think anyone is... needs to rally. Cavalry recovery. Yeah, no artillery needs to be resupplied. And there's no fire. There's no one within fire range. So yeah, the French, they can't move again. Yeah, so that's about it for the first turn. That was very quick and easy. And we're going to go into the 10 a.m. turn. We're going to see if Fane's light infantry, green jackets, can catch up to the French here. I suspect they're going to be able to, depending on what gets rolled. So interestingly here on the second turn, we had the AI already make a decision that I probably would not have made, which is kind of interesting. So the French chose, obviously based on his card, the French chose to take the initiative and make themselves the first player. Makes a lot of sense. They want to move before the British can get in a position to do something to them. However, when we look at the enemy proximity and the order placement, again, we're only using Delabord because all of the commanders are in range of Delaboard's 5 hexes. So here's Brenier, and here's Tomier down here within 5 of Delabord. We had to roll on this. So we have enemies in close proximity because we've only got 3 hexes distance from Fane here. So we rolled on this chart, and I rolled a 6, which means that Delabord's actually taking a reserve order. And because he's the divisional commander, that means all French units are under a reserve order. And that means this turn they're not going to be doing any moving except for possibly this artillery unit who is out of command, which I need to mark, and I don't want to necessarily get that closer. I think the artillery wants to set up kind of on this hex here with a line of fire in this direction to cover the retreating British, or possibly we want to get the artillery maybe even up here on the heights. Eventually we want to get it off the map below hex row 22, which would be, yeah, off this way. So we probably want to put it here to cover the French retreat, and then we want to move it off to get it to safety. So it's only going to have around half of its movement points because it's out of command this turn. The British had to choose their orders first, and they actually chose to do a reserve order because they want to move on the French turn. So what's going to happen here, and this is really interesting, and even though the French decided to go first, and had I been commanding the French, I would have had them gone first and move before the British could go. They're actually not going to move, and the British are going to get their reserve movement first, and they're going to be able to set up a position down here to possibly interdict the French retreat, especially if they can get and intercept them at this road crossing. So this is where the AI system makes things really unpredictable, and had I just been playing two-handed, this would not have occurred. So, it just goes to show you what can kind of happen here with the die rolls. We are about to have our first exchange of fire, or first fire engagement here of the game, and that is primarily due to the British reserve movement. They were able to get into position on the French turn, and on the British turn, the light infantry skirmishers are now within range to fire at this hex here. So the way that this is going to work is that skirmishers always have a 2 hex range to fire, and in this case they're in line versus being in column. So the 2 hexes are going to be the 2 front hexes plus the 3 hexes beyond that. That means that this French unit is in range of both of these French skirmisher units. So I'm going to start and show you. This whole system is based on columns of fire strength. And so we have to calculate that. And so this is where the sort of the markers come into play and the counter values come into play. So while a unit is deployed in skirmisher formation, you're going to use the firepower in the red box here. So the French have 4, the British light infantry have 3. So in this case, the British, you fire on your turn, so it's the British who are firing. So it's going to be this 3 is going to be the starting column, and I'll show you the chart in a second of where we begin. Then we look at other modifiers. This unit is disordered, and this red box here means -1 column. So it's down to 2. Then we are firing at opposing skirmishers, and this white box with the red number means further shifts for the person firing at it. So we are actually start at 3, 2, 1, 0. We're going to be on the lowest possible column because we're shooting at sort of a scattered formation and we are disordered ourselves. So we're firing on the 0 column. I'll show you the chart. So here is the chart. So here are all the columns. We started at 3. We were down 3. So we go to 0. We're really going to only have an effect at higher than 50. On this chart. There are modifiers here. You can see that at nighttime it's harder to hit. Leaders provide any fire modifying strength that they might have on their counter. There's very few of those in this game, if any at all. Well-directed fire is relevant to assaulting. Canister range and long-range fire is artillery related. We ignore the red ones. That's for the brigade game. And then there's also modifiers for the stack. So if they're in terrain, that would modify this. So all of this scrub terrain here is actually a -1 in this scenario, in this landscape. Firing on cavalry or through the flank as an enfilade are good modifiers. You want to try and do that. And obviously, if you're firing on skirmishers on débandade, -2, we already have that. And also, if you're firing on a column, units in column, it's a little bit easier to hit them. And then also there's stacking, so density also plays a part here. But in this case, it's a very simple calculation. It's on the 0 column. We're going to roll our percentile dice, and we are going to get 60. So if we look at the chart, anything 50 or below has no effect. Anything 50 to 69 is going to be a morale check, and we scored a morale check. So it's a pretty good shot by these disordered units. So we have to do now a morale check on this unit. The morale value here is this 41. So it's a 41 for the check for the French. They need to roll a higher than a 41 in order to pass. And they rolled a 25. So that is going to be a failed morale check for the French skirmisher unit. That is going to cause them to go to disordered status. And this is actually very beneficial. This is a good shot by our disordered unit. This is the reason I wanted to do this one first. So we're going to put this disordered marker here on top of it. So now this unit is disordered. So now we do a fire here. And you'll notice there's no combined fire. Each unit fires individually. And so what you can do is have a whole bunch of stuff pile up on a unit. And actually, I'm doing this in the wrong order. What should happen is that because I'm firing on the same unit with multiple units, we record what the result is first, which in this case was a morale check result. And before we do the morale check and apply the results, we then have this unit fire, and then all of the results are compiled together. So let's do that properly this time. We'll keep the rolls as we did them, but in this case, this unit is a 3. He's firing at this unit here, who is -2. Because he's in skirmish formation, so we're on the 1 column, slightly better. The British roll a 13. That is going to be nothing. As you can see, it's less than 40. So our first hit is the only hit, and we know what happened there. So after we tally up all the results from the fire, we do the morale checks. We only had 1, and it's going to be a disorder result for that unit. So pretty good. No step losses inflicted, unfortunately, but we're trying to get a little bit closer here with the British in order to do that. For the third turn here, the British are going to be going first, and they've chosen to take an attack order. They're going to come down here, and they're just going to try and get in the face of the French to just slow them down and interrupt their retreat and movement, because they're getting pretty close now to getting off the map. In fact, this artillery unit, I originally had talked about trying to get the artillery unit up here. There's just no way for the artillery to get through these woods. So really, I just want to get the artillery unit off the map. There's no use wasting it. But I do want to bring down Fane's light infantry. I actually might even switch them from skirmisher into line formation, depending on how far they can move, just to see if I can get in the face of the French here and maybe make an attack. They are under an attack order, so if I can reach them, that would be great. We've also got Wellington and Hill and Nightingale coming onto the map this turn. They're going to be able to move probably in road column somewhere down into this region. I might force march them as well. In fact, I'm going to have to force march them if I don't want the French to escape. So by the end of this turn, we will see a large Allied line taking place somewhere across this part of the map, and hopefully we can catch the French on the next turn. The British have made good headway here as we start the fourth turn. Wellington has sort of his advance force, who are actually pretty good British line infantry, coming down this road here, and he's approaching sort of the outermost French like rear guard positions. The Hill's 1st Brigade coming in this way, and in this turn we've got Trans-Portuguese plus Crawford's 3rd Division coming onto the map. So there's a lot of Allied forces making their way towards this area of the battlefield. The French have managed to, in a very messy fashion, cross this river, with the exception of this battalion here, who is still stuck due to being in skirmishing on débandade and not being in command. And he is kind of holding up this advance while the French scurry up these hills. Now, what's interesting is that this turn, I rolled an attack order for Delaborde. Still, all the units are in under the divisional command. I rolled an attack order, as you can see that here. But the rules do say that when you're using the bot, if a force that is in a defensive orientation in the scenario, which we know we're using the defensive cards, and they haven't reached their line of defense, their defense position, then you don't have to attack with them. They're not going to commit suicide by attacking and throwing away the game. So while I was a little bit concerned that they would have to throw an attack in against the British, they don't have to. They can continue moving back till they get into kind of this region here before they have to forced to launch an attack. So that's what we're going to do. But the British did get 2 orders this turn. It's the first time that's happened. So that's going to allow Nightingale and Wellington and feigned skirmishers to move in and potentially make some assaults. So I'm hoping we see that because the British have chosen to go first on this turn. So the French are going to have to weather at least one assault. I think these units here are close enough to make an assault. And other than the skirmisher fire that happened last turn between these units here, there haven't been too many effective disorders from fire. It's mostly been movement that has been disordering these units. So it's going to be an interesting turn. Well, this poor French unit who got caught out in front of the retreat is about to get walloped, although he has given a fair bit of lead to the British. So Wellington is under an attack order, and he had enough movement points to get his units out of road column into line and form up against him. So we have 3, there it is. We have 3 assaults coming in on this one hex. Now, unfortunately for the British, they had to make, first of all, when they entered this skirmish, he's in skirmisher on débandade, whenever they got adjacent to him, his zone of control is all around facing. They had to take some skirmisher fire. So that was bad. And that skirmisher fire actually had a pretty big effect on a lot of these units. And then after that, a lot of the British units had to make morale checks for a formation change. Morale check for a formation change to see if they became disordered. So here we've got Nightingale from the 3rd, and he is the only one, this 82nd Battalion, or 1st Battalion of the 82nd. He is the only one that managed to pass all of his checks. So that was the initial assault. Then we had Wellington move in here, and he took a disorder on the 29th A Battalion, and then this one is actually shaken because he took skirmisher fire to his front. He failed the morale check, and then he failed the morale check for the formation change. So even despite Wellington's morale boost there of 6, he was not able to overcome any of those challenges. And then, and actually there should be 2 units there. Yeah, so we had another unit move in. As you can see, the stacking gets a little nuts. This unit passed the skirmishing fire, and I need a skirmishing marker for him. Not that it's going to matter particularly much. Oh, no, he didn't have the skirmishing. He came in afterwards. Yeah, so if you enter a hex where there's already a unit, you don't have to take the reaction fire, and that's why he didn't deploy his skirmishers. They would all come off anyway, so it doesn't when the assault happens, but it's not a big deal. But he did fail his morale check for the formation change. So we've got a bunch of British units assaulting this position here, and I'll talk about assault in a minute. And then this unit here is also shaken, failing both his morale checks from the skirmisher fire and from the formation change. So it's not the most neat and tidy attack from the Allies, but they are going to be able to get it off at the very least. And we may have our first step loss. Hopefully we'll have our first step loss. We'll see how the fire goes. So we're going to do all of that. The one thing I do need to mention, though, is that the skirmishers' fire here with Wellington's aide-de-camp, Bathurst, actually managed to... He rolled a 97 on the fire, and when there's a leader involved, that is a leader casualty. And as you can see, Wellington's aide-de-camp is dead, taking some skirmisher fire to his face. So that's not great. But thankfully, it was just the aide-de-camp. He's not a leader of a formation, so I won't suffer any command issues from that. Yeah, that's we'll resolve that in a moment once we finish the rest of the movement of the Allied forces. So it turns out that this assault is not going to be too terribly exciting. Wellington just threw a bunch of manpower and disorganization away for this to happen. So we've got a unit in Skirmisher en Débandade. You have the option as Skirmisher en Débandade of retreating before assault. In this case, there is no reason why this unit would stay and face the might of the British vanguard. So he is going to retreat before assault. And the only thing that happens is that you either have to retreat to where there's a friendly unit or you have to retreat 2 to 3 hexes. So this guy is going to go 1, 2 to there. And I believe you have to keep your facing. But he's also going to take a level of disorder because he chose to do that. I'll check on the facing thing, but he's going to just go there. I guess he could also go here, which is maybe even a better option given the river. I'll check on that. These guys will have to advance. I'm going to figure out that advance, and that is the end of what was hopefully what I wanted to be a devastating attack. But as you can see, if you're in skirmish formation, it's really hard to pin you down. That's the whole point of skirmishing formation, and actually he was using it really well here to rear guard against these guys to let the rest of his friends get away. Here's the final situation at Scenario 1 of Roliça. We had the Allies come down, the skirmishers make a mad dash for the French line to try and get in their way and interdict their movement off the map. Unfortunately, this goes away at the end of the turn. Unfortunately, they were not able to cause a step loss on the retreating French units that were in these hexes. They did prevent the French from... removing all their units from the map. So on the final turn, this unit did not quite have enough movement points because he was in his own control to get to this hex. And this unit was out of command because he's deployed in Skirmisher en Débandade, which is maybe my mistake on the last turn, but he failed his command check for that. So he wasn't able to move because I got a reaction order. And if you are out of command, you don't get to partake in the order that the commander is giving you. Although, actually, I guess on the French turn, he would have been able to move. Let me just calculate that real quick. Yeah, it turns out even being out of command on the final turn, the final French half of the turn, which is the last activation for the scenario, he was able to actually get off the map, or out of the play area. So the French basically have one unit left under Thomier here, this little company who's disorganized, left in the play area. He was 1 hex away. I looked at the victory conditions for the scenario, and it doesn't actually indicate what happens if there are no step losses done, but the French don't get everyone off the map. So I'm going to call this one a draw, because if we look here, the British inflict at least a step loss. They inflict at least 3 step losses. They prevent any French units from exiting. That would be the minor, major, decisive. French voluntarily exit all units off without any step losses. And then... you get, if you do losses to the British, you get more. But that didn't happen, and I wasn't able to get the last one. So I don't know that it can be counted as a victory. I guess it's a draw, I would say. The rules don't really cover this situation, which is interesting that this never occurred maybe in playtests. Maybe I'm just playing it badly, and it's actually very possible for the French to run away and not get caught. Yeah, so we'll call it a draw with a slight lean towards the French since they only had, 1 unit left, and they would have been making their defensive preparations kind of up on this hill up here if we were to continue to a longer scenario. You could see just a ton of British forces coming in. This scenario actually not great for utilizing those forces. They come on pretty late, and then there's really not enough movement. It was too much traffic to get them all into the fight, really. So it's just kind of an exercise in moving. I guess it's good if you want to learn about moving and formation changes and stuff, but none of these forces ended up coming into play. The only ones that were really important were the skirmishers here and Wellington's 2 assault stacks there, but they didn't get much done. So, your mileage may vary on this scenario. It's not super compelling, but I do think the Roliça scenario, the full scenario, is probably more fun to play. But this is just a really quick look at the game and some of the procedures and also the AI card system, which actually I really, really like. So I'm going to do a separate video on just kind of my first impressions of these first couple scenarios that I played from this game. I did this one on video, and I've also played the first Vimiro scenario as well. So I've got a nice mix of short bursts of this system under my belt, and I've learned the battalion game. So I think I'm qualified to talk a little bit about my first impressions. So we'll do that. But thank you for watching this. And if you have any questions about the game or the system, feel free to leave them in the comments below, and I'll do my best to answer them.